you and congregate in the JFK Park. Please also take a moment now to silence your cell phones. You can join the conversation tonight online by tweeting with the hashtag JFK Junior Forum Live, which is also listed in your program. You can also follow us on Instagram at JFK Junior Forum. Please take your seats now and join me in welcoming tonight's guests, the Honorable Gina Raimondo and the Dean of the Harvard Kennedy School, Douglas Elmendorf.
Please. Hello, everyone. Let me offer my own warm welcome to all of you. It's wonderful to have you here with us tonight. I'm just thrilled to be here with my friend, Gina Raimondo, the governor of Rhode Island, for this year's Edwin L. Godkin Lecture. The Godkin Lecture was established at Harvard in 1903, long before there was a Kennedy School. The lecture honors Edwin Godkin, who was a 19th century Irish-born American journalist. He founded the political and cultural magazine The Nation and was editor-in-chief of the New York Evening Post. The inaugural Godkin Lecture was introduced by Charles William Eliot, then the Harvard president. Larry Bacow sends his regrets that he could not be here tonight to follow in President Eliot's footsteps. President Eliot praised Godkin's, quote, remarkable vigor and great candor and unremitting devotion to lofty ideals of public duty, unquote. And more than 100 years later, we look for that vigor and candor and devotion to ideals of public duty at the Kennedy School and at Harvard more generally. And certainly our current president, Larry Bacow, believes very strongly in the importance of this. And we are very lucky tonight to have with us somebody who exemplifies those virtues in her life and in her work. I couldn't ask for a better person to be this year's Godkin lecturer. Gina Raimondo was born in Rhode Island, came to Harvard College, where I met her. As I recall, she was a student in my section of Ec 10, which many of you know is the introductory economics course at Harvard. Gina was an outstanding student. She went on to win a Rhodes Scholarship. She has a master's and a doctorate from Oxford, and then a law degree from Yale Law School. Gina clerked for a federal judge in the Southern District of New York, worked for a while in the financial sector. And then in 2010, she ran for and won the position of General Treasurer of the state of Rhode Island. As a treasurer, she led an important and controversial effort to reform the state's public employee pension system, and we'll talk a little about that. Then in 2014, she ran for and won the position of governor. And last fall, she was reelected as governor by a very wide margin. So please join me in welcoming again Gina Raimondo, the governor of Rhode Island.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what we'll do is to ask Gina a few questions about her view of herself in public service. Then we'll shift a bit and talk a little about what she has done and plans to do as the leader of Rhode Island. Then we'll talk a little bit about broader issues in governance and politics today. And then I'll stop and we'll open the floor up and it'll be your turn to ask her the questions that are on your minds now or that develop over the course of our conversation.
Good.
So let me begin with a question I asked you a few years ago. So I knew Gina a long time ago, but was not in regular contact with her, and then was just thrilled to discover that she had taken on this very important role in elected office. But when I saw you and Andrew again, I said, well, how did that happen? Why did you choose to make this change in your life and take on this new sort of role? And how did you go about doing it?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me. It is so fun for me to be back here on campus. I have many happy memories of studying in the library here. It is no exaggeration that Doug is the reason I majored in economics and the reason I did so well in economics. It's true. It's a fact. I took Ec 10. I was this young kid from Rhode Island who had never taken an economics class, was certain that I was the mistake to have gotten into Harvard, signed up for Ec 10 with none other than Professor Marty Feldstein. So you walk in to Memorial Hall, there's 1,000 students, and you have this icon of economics. And the only way I got through it was his office hours. I was like a frequent flyer, and I say this with affection, drilled into me the basic concepts of micro and macroeconomics that to this day help me do my job. So
thank you.
I
That's very
mean
kind.
every word of that, and gave me the confidence that I needed actually to continue in economics. So why did I run? It was not obvious that I should run. Let's be clear. There are many good reasons not to run for office. In case you haven't noticed, politics is tough. I often joke, when I was here, I played on the Radcliffe rugby team. And I said playing rugby, especially with my stature, was great training for Rhode Island politics, because you have to like take a beating and get back up. But the honest answer is I really just felt called to serve. That is the honest answer. I felt a call to service as someone who had benefited greatly from my education. And I'm born and raised in Rhode Island, love Rhode Island. I had been, on a very personal level, as Doug said, I was a partner in a venture capital firm that I founded. I was doing very well in my career. I had small children, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. It would have been much easier to stay on that finance career path. But on a very personal level, I felt a need to do more, to serve. Really, is to serve. And one day I was reading the newspaper, and there was an article about how, on account of budget shortfalls, there were going to be cuts to the public bus service, which is really the only public transportation in Rhode Island. We don't have subways, we have buses. Cuts to after-school activities in public schools, and cuts to libraries, such that many libraries were going to be closed certain days of the week, and the buses weren't going to run nights, weekends, and holidays. And I remember very clearly, I put the newspaper down, it was a Sunday afternoon, and I said to my husband, I'm doing something about this. Enough is enough. Because all that fancy stuff he read about being a Rhodes Scholar and Yale Law School, this, that, and the other, began with public buses, public schools, public libraries, the GI Bill that allowed my dad to go to college, and I felt I had to do more. And in my state, anyway, at that time, a big part of the reason that there wasn't enough money to fund these other public goods was because pension systems of cities and towns and of our state was literally crowding out everything else. So I ran for treasurer. I called my mother. I said, Mom, I'm thinking of running for office. She started to cry and said, talk to your father. So she gave the phone to my dad, who said, why do you want to do that? You have a great job. You have 2 little kids. All right, if you want to do it, it's your choice, type of thing. And I won. And at that year, in 2010, I was the top vote getter. I got more votes than anybody running, which was kind of a mini miracle because I was pretty inexperienced. And I've never looked back. It's an honor to serve. And any of the young people here, or the less young people, you ought to think about serving. I am more idealistic now than when I began. 12 years into it, 5 statewide offices, 2 difficult primaries. I am more idealistic now than when I started, because it turns out you can get things done and change people's lives. If you're committed to doing that, you absolutely can. Sometimes young people say to me, oh, does it really matter? Or even everyone's. It doesn't matter who's in office. It really does. And in my experience, I've been able to accomplish more to help Rhode Islanders than I ever thought I could. So I'm a believer.
One of the wonderful pleasures of being a teacher at Harvard is the chance to get to know students. like Gina as she was then, and to hope to play some role in then becoming people like Gina is today. Let me ask a little question about how you see your own role in running for office. So there's a spotlight on elected officials, certainly senior officials like governors. As I recall you from many years ago, you were not a spotlight-seeking person, a self-aggrandizer. You were, I thought, a quiet, serious person who wanted to get things done. Do you find this public role, were your parents worried about this? Do you find the public role of this hard or gratifying, or in some combination?
So it's interesting. I'm not, even still, a publicity seeker, to use your term. But I love being with people. I do get energy from being with people. And my favorite part of my job is listening to my constituents. I love it. I do love that. And you learn from people. It makes you a better governor. I also love fighting for what I believe in. So I don't see it as seeking publicity for publicity's sake. For me, this whole thing is a means to an end. So, which is to say, I am results oriented. It drives my staff crazy. A lot of times you get exercise because you can't get everything that you want. You have to compromise. And they say, "Oh, Governor, why are you so results oriented? Can't you just for a minute indulge us in this emotion?" I'm like, no, we're here to do a job. We're here to put points on the board for the people of Rhode Island. So you can't do that if you're not in office, which means you have to campaign. You can't get big things done and through the legislature unless you really stump for what you believe in. So you have to do it. And for me, as I said, it's all just a means to an end to accomplish what we need to have happen. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. But for me, the best days on the job are talking to someone who says, 2 months ago, I went into a business. It was actually a company I recruited to Rhode Island. I saw a young woman there, and she looked so familiar to me. And I kept saying, I know you, but in my head. On the way out the door, she said, "Do you remember me?" By the way, never say that to a politician. Never say to someone who you've only met once, "What's my name?" It's tough. Anyway, I said to her, "I do, but remind me how I know you." Turns out I had met her. I've done a lot around IT training, providing IT training programs for folks who don't have a college degree but have a high school degree. When I met her, she had broken glasses, she was collecting food stamps, she was unemployed, and she was determined to get training to get a job. That's the first time I met her, at an IT training program that I was launching. The second time I met her, she was dressed up in a business suit, new glasses, a software engineer, making well over $70,000 a year at this company that I had recruited to Rhode Island. So if accomplishing that means that I have to be out and about and run for office and deal with the media, I'm in.
So that's a wonderful story. So let's talk a little bit about Rhode Island and what you've done so far in your as maybe treasurer and governor, and what you see as the important challenges that you're tackling going forward.
So I have, maybe because of your training, I sort of have a theory of the case of Rhode Island. He's laughing at me. And here's my theory of the case. By the way, who here has been to Rhode Island? Nice. All right. I love that. You need to come back. And anyone here from Rhode Island? Good. Okay. So I grew up there my whole life. Rhode Island was once a vibrant manufacturing economy. The jewelry manufacturing business in many ways was founded in Rhode Island and thrived in Rhode Island. When I was a kid growing up in the 70s, my dad worked at Bulliver Watch. He got in his carpool every morning, went to the Bulliver Watch factory. Everybody had a job at the factory. His buddies worked at Spidell. Some people worked at the Coro building. Some people, that's what you did. And there was the whole ecosystem around that. They were on the corner. They were like electroplating facilities. There was all the supply chain that goes into manufacturing. Every science project I did as a kid was around like the science of the chemistry of electroplating baths. and I wasn't unusual. And then that all went away. It all went away for all the reasons that you know. And for 20 years or more, it seemed like nobody was doing anything to try to fix it. My father's passed away now, and he lost his job when the factory closed. A couple years before he died, he said, "You know what the problem with Rhode Island was, Gina?" I said, "What's that, Dad?" And he was not an economist. He worked there his whole career. He said, "Massachusetts got into computers, and our leaders just stood still, and we got left behind." And he was right. In his own simple words, he was right. The leadership of my dad and everybody else was smart and hardworking and wanted a job. And they just watched factory after factory after factory close. And no one, it seemed to him, and I tend to agree, repositioned our state for jobs of the future. And by the way, our skill picture went right down with it. Rhode Island's still behind Massachusetts, for example, as it relates to percentage of people with higher ed degrees, percentage of training. So my theory was we had to make choices in our government, which allowed us to save some money, which is why I did the pension work, and then invest like crazy in economic growth, because our only hope as a state was to restart our economic engine, which was totally out of gas when I took office. When I ran, for the whole year I ran for governor, we had the highest unemployment rate in the country, #1 in America, not a distinction you want. And we were out of the recession. Massachusetts was chunking along. So I did what I did around the pension. We're happy to go into that. It saved people's pensions, but it also means we could get back into the business of investing. And all I've done since being governor is invest. Invest in infrastructure, invest in job training, invest in higher education, invest in K through 12, invest in recruiting companies to Rhode Island, tapping into what we're good at. We have the best design school in America. We have Brown. We have a great university system. We're tops in oceanography. There's certain areas in healthcare where we're terrific. The sum total of all of that work is that now, for the first time in forever, our unemployment rate is right in line with the national average. For the 12 months of last year, we had the highest wage growth in America. We have more people working than at any time in our state's history. I've recruited 30-plus companies to come to Rhode Island. And look around. When you come on your next visit, which I know you will see cranes in the sky, road work happening. There's palpable momentum. And the thing I'm looking at, wage growth, number of jobs being created, more than $50,000 a year, number of people with a degree or credential past high school. And they're all going in the right direction. None of that would have been possible, though, if we didn't take the medicine on pensions. So anyway, that's kind of a long-winded way of saying, and what am I going to do now? More of it. I'm so happy to have gotten elected because we need to solidify this. I've only had 4 years. You can't do enough in 4 years, though at the end of this term, I will have been in public life for 12 years. And we will have a meaningfully better environment for businesses and meaningfully more students with advanced degrees. And by advanced, I mean past high school. So I'm kind of a one-note Sally as it relates to jobs and job growth, but I do think it's the whole game.
So that was a wonderful arc. So let's move along the pieces of it. So let's go back to the public employee pensions.
Yeah.
So many people would say that trying to cut back on public employee pensions is a thing you should only do if you're about to move out of state or to live under an assumed name.
Yeah.
And yet you made the difficult choice, which is the name of our talk today, made a difficult choice. And in fact, then ran for governor and won, despite that. So talk us through how you made the choice and what you thought might happen afterward, and then what actually did happen afterward.
Yeah. So truthfully, I didn't find it to be a difficult choice because I didn't think there was any alternative. It was a very difficult political choice, and all of my political advisors advised me against it. I knew the politics and the political ramifications would be challenging, but in good conscience, there was no other alternative. Because if you did as I did, personally, poured through I became a mini actuary. I mean, I can't act, by the way, any actuaries here? It's not intuitive. Not intuitive. You know, I was like not a terrible economist and not a terrible mathematician. It does not translate. So I had to learn about all these actuary tables. Anyway, you pour through the numbers and you realize, oh my God, this system's broken. My daughter's in first grade at the time. Her school teacher, who was amazing, public school, and therefore in the system, was probably 35. This is a woman who is taking care of my daughter and teaching her all day long. And I knew her pension was not going to be there in 30 years when she needed it. Or half of it might be there. She was call of 35, she needs it at 65. No way. So once you come to that realization, I just didn't have it in me to continue the lie. And I felt I had to be straight with people. Also, if you looked at our budget, you know, the crowding out is real. By the way, it's fun. You guys, if you're taking economics, you learn about crowding out. You do all your charts. You actually use that in this job. And when I did the math of figuring out how much of our budget was spent on pensions and then how much it was going to be, there's no mystery why we were cutting school sports and closing libraries and whatnot. It's just the money wasn't there. So anyway, for me, it truthfully wasn't that hard. I decided in a very personal way, I'd rather fix that problem or try to fix it than get reelected. I absolutely knew that. I knew that, but it was worth it because I knew it was tough politics and probably no one else was willing to take it on. And the way I did it was very upfront. I would go to rooms and just talk to people. You know, people who are in the system, firefighters, teachers, state employees, retirees, hundreds and hundreds of them at a time, and say, I'm sorry, I have bad news. And I would take them all through it and explain why I thought it was necessary. I didn't convince everyone. The politics were hard for a long time. I had protests at every meeting I went to. When I ran for governor, I didn't have any support of any of the public sector labor unions. I had a very difficult primary. To be clear, the political ramifications were real, but I was able to become governor, and we did the right thing. And by the way, the system's healthier than it's ever been. It's healthier than it's ever been, and that's a great thing. For me, it was always about retirement security. It was not about taking anything away. It was about providing a secure retirement for people who play by the rules and deserve the money to be there at the end of their career.
Thank you. Let's go on to the investments then. So at the Kennedy School, we award every year the Innovations in American Government Award. The theme last year, the sorts of work from which we selected, was economic inequality. And the award was given, not chosen by me, but by some distinguished panel, was given to Rhode Island's Works Wonders program, which I think is part of these investments that you talk about.
Yes.
So could you say a bit about this wonderful program that we picked as the leading example of programs run by local governments and state governments in the country in the area of economic inequality?
So you have now put me on the spot and have to remind me more about that program.
Oh, so I know what I
Let me
copy
see
off
what
your
it is.
website.
If you just give me
it's
a
the
little.
our website. It's the Job Training and
It's for
Placement
young
Initiative
people.
for young
Yeah,
people.
exactly.
Yes.
So what it is I cannot remember the names of all these programs. I know the work and the substance. My staff makes up these creative names, so I'm sometimes at a loss. So what we have a lot of kids in foster care, and last year one of my big initiatives was extending the amount of time. Kids used to get kicked off at 18. I don't know about you, but I was not ready to live independently at 18. So we said they can go to 21 in the foster care system. And then we realized if you actually look at the results of kids in foster care, they're not where they need to be. They're not getting access to job training. They're not getting, the educational attainment isn't there. So we did a very targeted intervention, which I'm a big believer of. So we could tailor the initiative and tailor the intervention to teenage kids in foster care with kind of wraparound services to provide them with access to internships, access to job training, help to complete their education, and the results were really quite remarkable. And I think that's why we received the award, because the result for this much investment, like we improved the outcome of almost every young person that was in the program. And I think now why do I think that worked? Because it wasn't our idea. It was the people in the fields who work with foster kids every day. If I've learned one thing as governor, it's that. You can never have enough ground truth. Get out of the office and talk to people. So this was an idea that came from foster care providers. Like, look at the data, they would say. Look at this. These kids aren't any less talented or motivated or whatever. Why is this happening? And the answer is, like, they fall through the cracks in the system. There's a lot of cracks in the system. We think we're doing a great job by providing all these different programs. Well, at a transition point, kids, everyone falls through these cracks. So anyway, it was a targeted intervention, I think, well-tailored, and the results have been terrific. And these kids are getting jobs. It's amazing. They're doing terrific.
So you've just been talking about how to make the government programs effective. Listen to people on the ground, look for cracks, and try to fill those in. So I know part of the work that you've done in Rhode Island to help make the Rhode Island government more effective has drawn on the talents of my colleague Jeff Liebman
Yes,
and
we
his
love
folks
him.
here, and Jeff's Government Performance Lab, which can involve students and recent students, alumni of the Kennedy School and some other schools of public policy, has now worked, I think, with 70 or so state or local governments across the country, more than half of U.S. states. Can you say a bit about why you called Jeff?
Yes. Okay, so I had been governor for about a week, and I called Jeff. I don't know if you remember that. I barely knew, my office wasn't furnished. I barely knew my way around the State House, and I called you. Cold call, essentially, because I was familiar enough with your work. We had met, I think, once when I was treasurer, and I said, I need help. Because it turns out you could spend all the money you want in government. We spend about $9 billion a year in my little state. If you don't execute and implement well, you're not going to get the job done. If you were to say to me, hey, what are some lessons learned as being governor? It's all in the execution. You can have high-minded, fantastic, well-meaning ideas, and if you can't get it done, it's not that different than business. It's execution and implementation, and every state and every community is different. And I think politicians sometimes discount that because we focus on policy, not operations. So I called Professor Liebman and said, I need your help. I believe in what you're doing. I don't have really the staff or the expertise at this point in time to set up performance metrics, but I believe in it. And I promise if you come and give me some time and resources, I will be committed to it, which I think is critical to have to have the boss bought in. They've done an awful lot of work around job training, measuring. My thing is, let's measure and see what works, and then invest in what works and disinvest in what doesn't work. But you can't do that if you don't have the data. So because of his team, we went through all of our job training programs, and we're trying to figure that out. I had inherited a number of contracts in our Department of Children, Youth, and Families. In fact, what I was just saying, foster care contracts, child care contracts, social worker contracts. We were putting tens and tens of millions of dollars out the door a year, and there were no performance metrics in the contracts I inherited, like none. So not surprisingly, we had poor results, cost overruns, contract overruns, and his team went through in a very detailed way. We renegotiated all of these contracts. Our DCYF is much better now than it was. When I started, I couldn't even recruit a great director, a cabinet secretary for our Department of Children, Youth, and Families, because everyone who looked at it said, this is such a mess. Now I have a fantastic person. And as a directly related to your work, you helped me fix it. I was saying earlier, when you're out campaigning, as you can imagine, you can't give a rousing speech about performance metrics and inspired effective government and, KPIs in these contracts. But it really matters. It matters not only because it's how you make the programs work and people's lives better, but at the end of the day, if everything we do is poorly executed, people lose faith in government. And when people lose faith in government, then they just say, doesn't matter who's in office, why should I vote? Let's just cut taxes and make government small. Government is the problem. It makes it very hard for those of us who actually believe in effective government to make the case, because all these implementation mistakes actually erode people's confidence and trust. So for me, we did a lot, I won't go on, but we did a lot around opioids, mental health. I mean, you've been enormously helpful. And I, commend you to any of my colleagues.
Thank you. You also talked about encouraging businesses to locate in Rhode Island. So we have all just watched, most of us from afar, maybe some with direct or closer connection, as Amazon has decided to establish a large facility in Crystal City, Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C., and had originally decided and then decided not to establish a large facility in New York City. And the New York City case, as it turned out, Mayor de Blasio was here the night the day that Amazon announced it was pulling out. Wow. So we got a little up close perspective from him.
Fun for you, not for him.
But there is, yes, but there is the challenge, of course, in New York was, is the city and is the state giving away too much to Amazon? Is it worth the cost of that and other things that the city and state could do? So when you think about luring businesses to Rhode Island, how do you think about the costs and the benefits and who bears them and how to work that out?
So it's very important to focus on the substance and not the politics. I'm not going to opine on the Amazon deal because I don't know, actually. I haven't looked at what they were offering and what they were going to get for it. Someone did tell me that the subsidy for Amazon was actually equivalent to various other subsidies of much smaller magnitude, which was interesting to me. Look, my job is to create jobs. And if that means providing some sort of a tax benefit for companies that create high quality jobs, then I'm okay with that. It doesn't mean giving the farm away. It doesn't mean giving a bigger tax break than you need. But the fact of the matter is, at least in Rhode Island, I've recruited 30 plus businesses to Rhode Island and we've used tax incentives. They weren't coming before I got there. So are we giving up a little bit of the upside, a little bit of the tax revenue? Yes, we are. But I would have had nothing. And now we're creating jobs. And the average salary of the jobs we create through these tax incentive programs is much higher than the median income. I think it's $65,000, $70,000 a year. So the politics is very, very easy politics. It's corporate welfare. You go tell that to the people who now have jobs who didn't before. I go to lunch at a place frequently, and I'm kind of friendly with the waitress. And her husband is in the building trades. When I took office as governor in Rhode Island, the unemployment rate in the building trades, plumbers, pipe fitters, electricians, carpenters, was over 20%. 22, 23, 24%. You know what that looks like. That looks like people having been out of work for a year or two, not paying their mortgage, losing their house, losing their confidence, losing their pride, losing their marriage. Unemployment rate now in Rhode Island in the building trades, 2%. They're all working. This woman's husband, and some of them are working building buildings of companies I've recruited to Rhode Island. So this woman's husband has been working in Providence consistently since I've been governor on various buildings downtown. And every time I see her, she's like, I don't care what they tell you about those tax incentives. You just keep doing what you're doing, because my husband's never had such steady work since ever. So, look, you got to do your job. I'm a tough negotiator. We just give away a piece of the upside. The way I've structured our tax incentives, if the job goes away, the credit goes away, they don't get a penny of credit until they've created the job. The person's been working for a year. So that you have to be smart about taxpayer money. Having said all of that, in a perfect world, every state would just have, lower and reasonable taxes and the same. But we don't, and I can't create that, and I have to be a pragmatist and live within the system I have. And so I'm out there in the ring for Rhode Island, trying to bring home jobs for Rhode Islanders. But I don't think the politics, I really think we do people a disservice when we take the simple way out. Because in fact, people lose out.
So that's, I think, a great segue to a broader discussion about how you see politics, governance in the country more broadly now. You were featured in a story in the New York Times several weeks ago. The headline was The Loneliness of the Moderate Democrat. And I noticed over the weekend that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez from New York at the South by Southwest conference was quoted saying, not in reference to you, I believe, but just generally, moderate is not a stance. It's just an attitude towards life of like, meh, unquote. So I'm guessing that's not, you didn't pick the New York Times headline, presumably. I don't know what labels you applied to yourself, but presumably that's not your view of what it means to be a moderate. Can you talk about how you see these issues?
So I don't apply any labels to myself, other than, doer, get things done. Everyone else applies labels to me. Like I quoted in that piece, someone called me a spineless centrist. So here's a few my thoughts on this. When I think of moderate, I think of someone who's willing to compromise to get things done. Someone who's willing to take 3/4 of a loaf instead of the whole loaf because it's better to get things done. And that is the way I govern. Because, as I said, I think it's the only way to get things, to accomplish things. It's not always sexy, it's not always seen as passionate, but it's what I think we have an obligation to do. It's not about us, me in other words, it's not about politicians. What are you going to do for your constituents? And that means you have to sometimes meet in the middle to produce results. I also think that sometimes people put a label attached to me because I have a track record of working with businesses. And sometimes people say, well, how can you be a good progressive when you're so close to business? You get a lot of that. How can you be a good progressive if you're so close to business? My answer to that is, I don't give business a free pass. They have to do their fair share, pay their fair share. Right now I'm doing a Medicaid assessment on businesses who employ people, but they make so little they collect Medicaid. But I am not going to constantly malign business because I need them in my state creating jobs and being part of the solution. They have to do their share and be part of the solution. So, that's what I think, and I further think, as it relates to elections, we have to produce economic security for people. So, as you said, every political pundit counted me out in 2014. I had a difficult primary. I had no traditional labor support. I was running against an enormously popular mayor of Providence, who was a Dominican. He's actually a wonderful guy. And I won by double digits. In this re-election, I had a primary, a very difficult primary, from, you could say, from the left, attacking me on my closeness with business. And again, a lot of people counted me out. I won by more than 20 points. Why? I think it's because at the end of the day, I've delivered some wage growth, job growth, economic security, better roads, rebuilding our schools, stuff that people actually care about. No one sitting at home trying to figure out, am I a liberal? Is she a liberal? Is she a centrist? Is she a whatever? They're trying to figure out, what's she going to do for me and my kids? With her in office, do I keep my health care? With her in office, can my kids go to community college tuition free? With her in office, is she going to rebuild my school? So I'm like, enough with the labels, more about the results. And sometimes my thing is, sometimes you have to compromise. I've never gotten everything I've wanted. Every proposal I put into the legislature, it doesn't look the same when it comes out as when it goes in. It never does. That's okay. That's the process. That's the process. Live with it. Stick with it. Don't give up. Be results oriented and deliver for your people.
So you should start thinking of your questions, because I'm going to turn it over to you in just a couple of minutes. You're the chairwoman now of the Democratic Governors Association.
Yes, yeah.
So when you talk to your fellow governors, what do you talk about? How much of the experience that you've had do they share? Give us a sense of what those interactions are like.
So when governors get together, we all talk about our legislatures. That's like the parlor game. Every executive does that. We talk about how nothing's happening in Washington, and it's a good thing governors and mayors are doing things. And I think there's 23 of us, I can't speak for everyone, but by and large, governors, because we have to balance budgets, pay the bills, be with our constituents every day, many of them have to deal with legislatures of an opposing party. We're typically more open to compromise and pragmatic, just because we have to be. So we talk a lot about what more can we do. I think we feel, and even because Washington is either doing nothing or, in our view, doing bad things, we talk a lot about how do we fill the void? How do we fill the void of leadership and action at the federal level, at the state level? And some of that looks like keeping the Affordable Care Act alive and well in our states. Some of that looks like moving the ball down the field as it relates to climate change and resiliency on a state-by-state basis, because nothing's happening nationally. And some of it just looks like speaking up and speaking out. I remember after the horrible situation in Charlottesville, Virginia, a lot of governors, we were on the ground with really scared constituents. And we just really had to speak out and be present against anti-Semitism, racism, hatred, etc. So anyway, we talk a lot about, okay, it's on us to act because we have to. Also, we have to be innovative. You know, I wish the federal government, you know, I don't know if I'm allowed to be partisan at all, so I've been very careful this whole time, but when the president was running, he talked a lot about a $1 trillion infrastructure plan. I'd love to see some of that money. Where is it? I haven't seen it. Hasn't come. I'd love the federal government to step up in a real way around so many of these issues. Big investments in job training, big investments in anything really. Pick a topic. Expanded earned income tax credit at a federal level. But it's not happening, so we have to say, all right, what can we do? It's not as good necessarily if we have big, bold federal action, but what can we do?
So my last question for you was going to be, are you going to run for president? But I mentioned this at lunch today to a colleague who said, well, that's kind of a boring question because everybody's running for president. So I guess I should ask instead, are you going to do the straightforward, conventional thing of running for president, or are you going to strike out on your own and not run for president?
Right, exactly. So I am the governor who's not running. I tease, like, I'm the one Democratic governor not running for president. So no, in all seriousness, no, I am not running. I've just been reelected. I've got 4 years. I have a lot to do. But I'm going to do everything I can to get a Democrat elected. I will tell you that. And so as you said, I'm the chair of the Democratic governors. Having more and stronger Democratic governors will it just makes it easier to get a Democrat in the White House. So last year, we picked up Michigan. It flipped Republican to Democrat. We picked up Wisconsin. That's going to help. That will help in 2020. And anything I can do to keep governors strong and get more of them, I'm going to do that.
Thank you very much. So now it is your turn. I'll work my way around calling on people. Please say who you are. Keep your question short, and let's make sure it is a question. And then we'll let Governor Raimondo answer. Let's start over here, please.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth, and I'm a freshman at the college, and I'm also taking Ec 10. And recently, there's been a little bit of dialogue because the head of the Ec 10 class, Gregory Mankiw, has decided to step down. And I've seen a lot of Facebook posts among students saying, you know, Ec 10's the #1 way that students learn social policy, and we've had a Republican head of the course, you know, for so long, we should switch it. So I was just wondering your thoughts on a class like Intro to Economics. Should there be a social policy element? Should it be strictly economics? What's your role? What do you think the role of a university should be in that class?
Yeah. So I had Professor Mankiw for macroeconomics, and he was a terrific professor. I had Professor Feldstein. I also had Professor Katz, Claudia Golden, and David Cutler. And so that's the left and the right. And I feel blessed to have had the variety of viewpoints. And I think the role of a university is to educate its students and to challenge its students. And if you were to ask me, like I have a teenager, so if my kid were to go to college and say, hey, Mom, what should I do? I would say, absolutely take classes from people you disagree with. You'll be smarter. Where are they coming from? If only to figure out how to disagree with them in a more thoughtful way. I also think it's important for young people, for all of us, but you're learning how to deal with disagreement. It's going to come at you your whole life, and you can't just run away from it. Or you can, but you won't be effective if you do. So I didn't know Mankiw was stepping down, and I don't know any of those details. I can tell you in my experience here, I had quite right-leaning economics professors and quite left-leaning and some in the middle, and I learned from all of them. And I'm better for it.
I will just add, for those of you who are Kennedy School students, you recognize that one of the themes that we're pursuing this year at the Kennedy School is to practice the skills of civil discourse.
Yeah.
Because it is not always easy. It's not always easy for anybody, and it's particularly not easy in the polarized times that we live in today, but it is incredibly important for one's own education and for one's own effectiveness in the world.
Yeah, so I will say, if a student who has a left-leaning view could figure out a way to turn around Greg Mankiw, that's awesome, right? Like, figure it out. Go toe to toe. Don't leave. Don't yell. Don't remove yourself. See if you could convince him of your point of view, and that would be great.
Thank you. Over here, and we'll go up and around.
Hi, Governor. My name is Ryan Piranunzi. I'm a MPP student here at the Kennedy School and a fourth-generation Rhode Islander. It's great to finally meet you.
Yay! What town? Where are you from?
Woonsocket.
No, wonderful.
Yep. And my question is related to the census coming up.
Yeah.
As you know, Rhode Island's at risk of losing a congressional district due to its slow population growth. And this is particularly an issue because of the fears of like underreported or undercounting of populations due to the president's language on immigration. I was wondering if the state was doing anything to make sure that everyone was being counted in 2020, and so that we can minimize the chance that we lose a seat. And I also, unrelatedly, any chance we're getting the Paw Sox back?
Oh, I want to talk about that. So yes is the answer. I did an executive order around this topic and put together a working group and to make sure that we are doing everything we can on a state level to support the census. And I have some money I've proposed some money in my budget to legislature because it's vital. Isn't it just vital to Rhode Island? I mean, I hear you. We don't want to lose. We have about 1 million people. We have 2 Congress people. We don't want to lose one. But there's a lot of concern around the census. So, yes, I am putting state time, effort, resources around awareness, really encouraging people to fill it out, and just making sure we have the resources on the ground to properly execute it. So the second question he asks about, does anyone know who the Paw Sox are?
Yes.
Oh, good, you know the Paw. Okay, great. So the Paw Sox are the AAA farm team of the Red Sox. Forever they've played in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, hence the name Paw Sox. They had a new ownership team come in a few years ago, and they wanted a fancy new stadium. McCoy Stadium, which is where they play now in Pawtucket, has seen better days. It's a little run down. By the way, you can still go there and for $6 watch a game and get your kid a hot dog for a couple bucks. So it's still a great family place. Anyway, new ownership team comes in, wants a fancy new stadium. This relates to your question before. Came to us, the state, asking for a very large subsidy. Very large. We said no because we had to do our job with taxpayers. It was my job to protect taxpayers. In the meantime, Worcester came along and offered a gigantic subsidy. And I just didn't think it was the right thing to do to compete with that gigantic subsidy. So the team's moving to Worcester. I think they're going to be called the Woo Sox. And it's sad. It's sad. I grew up just like you. And it's a sad thing. But I don't think it would have been responsible to compete with the Worcester deal and put that much of a taxpayer subsidy into this stadium. So I'm hard at work trying to get some other use for the stadium. Soccer team, double A team. I'm not letting the lights go out on McCoy.
Thank you. Up here.
But that was a tough decision.
Yes. No.
That,
Yes.
it's the theme of our talk, tough decisions. Emotionally, you don't want it to go. But I think we did the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Up here, please.
Hi, my name is Luke Albert. I'm a first year at the college. I was wondering, Governor, what you think the future of the regional greenhouse gas initiative is in climate policy, not just in Rhode Island, but also for New England going forward for the next decade.
Yeah. Where do you live?
Oh, well, originally I'm actually from Oklahoma,
No,
but
I meant where do you live on campus?
Canada.
Oh, okay. I lived in Stoughton, so I was wondering if you lived there. Oklahoma. Nice. So, in Oklahoma, they're starting to teach school 4 days a week.
Yeah.
That's their solution to the budget crisis. They have such religion around taxes. Like I was telling you before. Don't raise taxes. This is what I was saying. Government's the problem. Starve the beast. Don't raise taxes. So you're going to find the money somewhere. So they teach in school 4 days a week. Think about that. So he asks about something called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a regional cap and trade program in the Northeast in which Rhode Island participates. I have been a vigorous supporter of RGGI and have, since I've been governor, advocated to make the caps tighter to really, make it hard to achieve these carbon emissions goals. And overall, it's been a huge success, I would say. I am in favor of a national carbon tax, but on a state level, that's hard to do, especially in a little state like Rhode Island. So short of that, this cap and trade program has been very effective. It's on a regional basis. It's been hard, back to my implementation point, it's hard to hold it together. Every state wants to go off and do their own thing. Some people want higher standards, some people want lower standards. But it's a great credit to all the states involved. We're hanging together. We abide by it, and we've seen great results. And when you do that, it requires you to innovate and go find other carbon emitting solutions. And we've done that. Rhode Island is the site of America's only offshore wind farm. That's great. That's exciting. We have big solar increases. So overall, it's been a great program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over here.
Hi, Governor. Thank you so much for coming here tonight. My name is Anan Hafez. I'm also a first year at the college. And my question is about education. Obviously, you have a long-standing passion for education, being a student here at the college, a Rhodes Scholar, someone who went to Yale Law. And in light of the recent admissions scandal that's been going on across the country, what are your ideas, or what are you doing to make education more financially inclusive or just more fair to all students?
Yes. This scandal is so upsetting, not just the details of what we're now learning, the bribery, but just back to how people feel. When people read things like that, the takeaway is, well, you got to be rich to get in. It's about money, not just talent. And that's a terrible thing. We have to keep the dream of the American dream. We have to keep the American dream alive. We have to make it true. And we have to do it enough that people actually really believe it. They actually really can get ahead. I believe in education because it changed my whole life. My dad was one of 5. His brothers were all butchers. He served in the Second World War. He got the GI Bill. He went to college. One guy going to college changed his life, my mother's life, my brother, my sister, and me forever. Generations. So it matters. One of the initiatives that I have done that I am most proud of is called the Rhode Island Promise Program. Any high school graduate in Rhode Island can go to our community college for 2 years tuition free. Since we've done, that is a drop in the bucket. Of a $9 billion budget, it's $5 million a year. So don't tell me we can't afford it. Since we've done this, we've seen a quadrupling of the number of students on time to graduate, who are going to graduate on time in 2 years. And we've seen a doubling in the number of applicants straight out of high school. The first year I became governor, I started an initiative where you could take college classes for college credit for free. Prior to me being governor, you could, in high school, you could take college classes for college credit in high school, $200 a class. This may be hard for some of you guys to realize. $200 is a lot of money. And so we took it down that barrier. And we've seen a massive increase in the number of students taking college classes for college credit in high school. So, you could maybe get a year of college under your belt in high school with this, and then either go to a 4-year college and get it for the price of 3, or take the Promise program. I'm doing everything I can to cut down the financial barriers to going to college. And I think we can't do enough of it. We can't do enough of it. It's amazing to me. When I was pitching my Promise program, it's a last dollar scholarship. So you get your Pell Grant, you get everything, there's a gap, we give you a scholarship. The actual size of these scholarships is quite small because of the way we structure it. And I remember doing radio programs, stumping for it, and of course everyone says it's free, we shouldn't give handouts. And then one of the interviewers said, well, you're only talking about $500. Can't they just borrow $500 from grandma? Like, maybe you could have, but they can't. And they'll drop out of college over $500. Where are they going to get it? And I have spent enough time on colleges' campuses at CCRI, Rhode Island College. It is heartbreaking. The number of students who just give up. By the way, I might give up too. They're working 2 or 3 jobs. They're commuting to school. They're taking a full course load. There comes a breaking point, and after maybe like that second year, they give up and they drop out. And then they're stuck with no degree, limited job prospects, and a mountain of debt. So in addition to the fact that we can afford it, and it's the right thing to do to provide opportunity, it's just good for our economy. Correct me if I'm wrong about this. You know more about me than I am. But since the last recession, 9 out of 10 jobs that have been created are for people with a degree or credential past high school. That's a very scary reality for the average person. Because how are you going to afford college? So what are you going to do? You want to talk about why are people angry? Why is there this populist movement? Because that's a scary set of facts. How am I going to get my kid a college degree? And oh, by the way, if I don't, they'll never get a good job. So college cannot be for the rich. We got to bring down the cost of college. We need to change the way we deliver it, and we need to subsidize it. And for my mind and my money, it's the best investment we can make. And it does keep the American dream alive and well in a very real way.
Thank you for that question. We'll go around. Yes. Please.
Governor, I'm a first-year student at the college. My name's Nick.
Nick.
What I was curious about was, since the federal budgeting process seems to have so many problems, and how the federal government seems to run a budget deficit every year, and we just had a 35-day government shutdown because of these inability to reconcile these these deficits and these costs. And meanwhile, all 50 states, including your state, seem to balance their budgets every single year. Why aren't we seeing more state houses taking up more responsibilities from the federal government to sort of help manage that political impasse that's happening?
I love Nick. So we're trying to, and you're exactly right. States don't have a luxury. You got to balance your budget every year. So That's what I'm saying. That kind of force, that forces compromise. It's not perfect. It is not perfect. It is often not pretty, but it's much better than the alternative. When's the last time the federal government actually passed a budget? Do you know?
In years.
I think like 1996.
Budget is the plan you're supposed to pass before you do specific legislation, and we don't pass them because we can't agree enough to write something down that we vote for.
Yeah, I think it's a stunning. I think it was like in the late 90s was the last time there was, true bipartisan actually voted to pass a full budget, not just these continuances. Washington's got to get its act together, and I honestly think the only way to make change is from the bottom up. That may sound too idealistic, but I don't have a lot of hope for great change from the top down from Washington. They're not going to change. The system's not going to change on its own. It's just not. So you and I need to agitate from the bottom and elect different people and hold them accountable and make it clear that this is not okay. It's actually an embarrassment to the rest of the world, I think, that we operate the way we do. And if more people thought the way you did and got activated for it and voted that way, I think we could drive change from the bottom up.
So we are in overtime, so I see two people standing. Could you each give your question briefly, and then we'll see if Governor Raimondo can respond to them both in some unified way.
Yeah, great.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Sang. I'm a second-year Master in Public Policy student. I'm actually working on my policy analysis exercise for the Rhode Island's Office of Food Strategy, which has been really fun. You talked a lot about luring companies to Rhode Island to create jobs. But can you talk a little bit about what you're doing for businesses and small businesses that are already in Rhode Island and how to help them support the jobs?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Governor, for coming. My name is Richard. I'm a second year at the law school, and I'm also an EC10 TF. And so I was curious to get your thoughts on education related, how you use your legal education and your legal training as a clerk in both business and now as an executive in government.
Yeah. So I never really practiced law. I clerked, and then I joke that I practiced at a big New York law firm for a day. Look, I'm in the business of making laws. So having a legal background is incredibly helpful. Also, I've been, as governor and treasurer, sued more times than you can shake a stick at. The pension litigation, first I had to get a law passed. I was immediately a defendant in 70 plus lawsuits. And I took a very active role in managing that to a conclusion. We settled all the lawsuits. It was like a mini miracle. We consolidated into a class action. We settled it. I don't think I would have been as effective in doing that if I didn't have legal training. I know I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have had the confidence to try, and I wouldn't have had the skill set to be as hands-on as I was. And there's been other similar lawsuits like that where I've been really quite hands-on to guide things to settlements. And so my legal training has been enormously helpful. Plus I met my husband in law school. So really, what's better than that? We do a lot, I will say what gets all the attention is the tax incentives. Companies don't move just for a tax incentive. That's like the last thing. I never lead with that. They come to Rhode Island because it's a good place to do business. It's nestled between New York and Boston. We have great colleges and universities. Frankly, because we've fixed our fiscal house, which, say, Connecticut can't say. They're our neighbor. So that provides companies with predictability and stability. And then the tax incentive is just like the icing on the cake to close the deal. The most important thing I do for existing businesses is just, we've cleared out a lot of outdated regulations. I've done a lot of streamlining. A typical small business has like 1,000 points of friction with government in a year. Permits, regulations, you name it. So if the more I can move that online, make it seamless, make it easy, that's not headline grabbing. It really makes a difference, and we've done a lot of that. We started a small business loan fund, first one in a long time. I'll give you another example. Right after I became governor, Goldman has this 10,000 small businesses program. And I went to Goldman. It's kind of like I did to Professor Liebman. I said, I want this in Rhode Island. And they said, well, Governor, we can't. It's only for cities. It's a program that provides training for entrepreneurs. It's fantastic, and then they do small business loans. And I said, well, come on, it's a small state. We're a city-state. Consider me a city. It's a city-state. And I essentially badgered them until they said yes. And they've done it. We've had hundreds of small businesses go through the program. They love it. They've all added jobs. People said, Gina, don't do that. You're a Democrat. You can't be getting Goldman Sachs to come to Rhode Island. And I said, no, we're going to do it because it's the right thing to do. And I go to every graduation, and the entrepreneurs love it. Because you think about it. If you're going to open a restaurant, you love cooking. You might not know how to capitalize your business. If you're going to open a bakery, you love baking. You might not know how to negotiate or deal with a bank. So that's what this program does. So anyway, we provide, I think the best thing government can do is to just keep it simple and make it easy to interact with us. But these other things have been very helpful. Before I get kicked off this stage, I have to make one shameless plug. If any of you are students and you want to come work with me, you should do it. In the summer, during term, internship, after you graduate. I just hired someone, Danielle. So Rhode Island's a great place to be. I promise you'll have a great experience. You'll make a difference. I can't do this without talent. I'm going to embarrass someone. Raise your hand, BJ. So he didn't know I was going to do this, and I didn't know he was going to be here. BJ works for me. He was a senior executive at Hasbro, the toy company, big employer in Rhode Island. And I needed to upgrade. I needed a new CIO, CTO, technology in state government. I could come back and do another lecture on that. I've learned the hard way. And I went to him and said, I want you to do this. He applied. I said, I want you to do this. Huge pay cut, much less glamorous job, and the guy is making the difference of a lifetime. Now, what I say to everyone, you don't have to do it forever. Just give me a year or two of your life. You'll make a difference. It'll be the best professional experience you ever had. And you can meet the people whose lives you've changed. And you can look at the projects that happened because of you. And there's plenty of time to go make money. But there's not always a great time to change the world for the better. And I thank God every day that BJ did this. And if any one of you wants to join me, you should call me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
This has really been an inspiring evening for me, and I think for all of us. Thank you, Governor Raimondo, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.